Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carly Stevens. I'm the author of the Tanuan Academy series, and this is English Nerd. So to continue in the My Favorite Poems series, where I analyze a poem that I really like, I wanted to talk about My Last Duchess by Robert Browning. Now, there are other poems, I'll be perfectly honest, that I do like a lot more, but they're significantly longer. So those are definitely coming, they're on the way, but just for the sake of time, I am back to teaching full-time every single day in person, and so it just is a little bit more difficult for me to make very long videos. So I chose a poem that's a little bit shorter, and it's one that is pretty common for analyzing. It's written by, like I said, Robert Browning. He is the husband of Elizabeth Barrett Browning, who was actually up for Poet Laureate when she was alive. She was the first woman to be considered. Alfred Lord Tennyson beat her out, but that is worthy of note. She was the one who was famous during their lifetimes and not him. But I like Robert Browning because of his crazy flair for monologue. So without further ado, here is My Last Duchess. So here's My Last Duchess by Robert Browning. The first word there, Ferrara, is a reference to the Duke of Ferrara. It's supposed to be the speaker, essentially. So what we have here is a monologue. It's something that could come out of a play, but there is no greater context than just this one poem. And that's kind of typical of Robert Browning. He would write all these monologues, kind of take on these different personas. A lot of them are really dark, like this one, as you'll see. And I think it's fun. He played around and was kind of insane. So we're gonna take a look. He starts off, "That's my last Duchess." Of course, you know, My Last Duchess, it refers to that's what the title comes from. "That's my last Duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. I call that piece a wonder now. Looking as if she were alive." So right away we see that there is a sort of beat to this speech, but there isn't really much of a set rhyme scheme. It looks like a blank verse. There is some beat, but no rhyme, like I said, which is again a monologue format, essentially. So right away we have his previous wife, My Last Duchess, who's in this painting looking as if she were alive. And we need to keep that in mind because it turns out that she is dead. And the way that he talks about his wife is kind of unsettling. So we'll see. "I call that piece a wonder now. Frau Pandolf's hands worked busily a day, and there she stands. Will it please you, sit and look at her?" So you here, we don't know who he's speaking to, but we'll find out later on. Both of these people are looking at the painting of his last Duchess. "I said Frau Pandolf by design, for never read strangers like you that pictured countenance, the depth and passion of its earnest glance. But to myself they turned, since none puts by the curtain I have drawn for you but I, and seemed as they would ask me, if they durst, how such a glance came there." Okay, so we have a lot going on there. So he's saying that Frau Pandolf is the one who created this painting, of course, and now none puts by the curtain I have drawn for you but I. So here, he is the only one who can move the curtain that's normally in front of this picture. That's one of our first hints that he is a person who likes to be in control. The second hint that we get here is, seemed as they would ask me, the people who see this picture, if they durst, if they dare, how such a glance came there. Normally, asking why is that expression on her face, that wouldn't be something that you would need to dare to ask. And so we get all these initial red flags about the Duke's character being somebody who's controlling, somebody who you can't ask a question to without fearing some repercussions. And the glance that people are maybe going to dare to ask about is the pictured countenance and the depth and passion of its earnest glance. This is what's depicted in the picture. The depth and passion of its earnest glance, which says a couple of things, but we'll see what that says about the painter, Frau Pandolf, and about his Last Duchess as well, who is sort of the main character, I guess, the main topic of this poem. So, not the first are you to turn and ask thus. So the person who he's talking to already asked, why does she have that striking look on her face? Sir, so it's a guy. Sir, 'twas not her husband's presence only called that spot of joy into the Duchess's cheek. Perhaps Frau Pandolf chanced to say, her mantle laps over my lady's wrist too much, or paint must never hope to reproduce the faint half-flush that dies along her throat. Such stuff was courtesy, she thought, and cause enough for calling up that spot of joy. Okay, so the main thing we need to focus on here is his initial response to the question. Yes, lots of other people have asked it, but here's his answer to the reason she has that look on her face. Sir, 'twas not her husband's presence only called that spot of joy into the Duchess's cheek. There's an understanding or an implication that it should have been only her husband's presence. It should have been only the Duke who's speaking that should have called that blush to her cheek, but instead she looks happy, she looks bright and attentive, and she has that earnest glance that she gives to many people. She gave it to the painter when he was complimenting her and saying all these kind things, whether because she is a duchess and he felt the need to say something kind, or because he really thought that she was that beautiful. Either way, that was cause enough for calling up that spot of joy. She had a heart, how shall I say, too soon made glad, too easily impressed. She liked whatever she looked on, and her looks went everywhere. Here's where we really get to the meat of the poem. In this poem, you want to treat it more like prose almost than poetry. The words are very specifically chosen, but it's more to reveal character than theme, even, I would say. So she had a heart, how shall I say? Up to this point, the Duke has been pretty not straightforward, but here we see him being kind of coy with his answer. How shall I say? It was too soon made glad, too easily impressed. So far, all we've heard is that she blushes at the compliments that this painter is giving her, but he seems to be upset by it. She's too soon made glad. She liked whatever she looked on, and her looks went everywhere. Again, there's the implication that she should have looked only at him, but she's looking around. So we're not sure if she's the kind of person who would run off and have an affair because of her wandering eyes, or if she's the kind of person who just enjoys life and he is controlling enough that he wants that joy only to have to do with himself. So that's where we are at this point. Sir, 'twas all one, which is just to say, oh, it doesn't really matter. My favor at her breast, the dropping of the daylight in the west, the bough of cherries some officious fool broke in the orchard for her, the white mule she rode with round the terrace, all and each would draw from her like the approving speech, or blush at least. So here it's not just that she's looking around at other men, people that she might have some affair with. It's everything. Not only her husband's favor, but also sunsets bring this spot of joy. The mule that she rides around the terrace. He only mentions one person, this officious fool, this kind of busy, interfering guy who gives her a bough of cherries. But it's this zest for life that she has that he can't stand because it's not directed at him. So those hints that we saw early on of that controlling nature where people are afraid to ask him questions, he's the only one who can reveal the portrait, are really coming to light here. We know that he is trying to control his Last Duchess, who, remember, is painted on the wall looking as if she were alive. She's no longer alive. Okay, so we're back here. She thanked men. Good. But thanked somehow, I know not how. as if she ranked my gift of a 900 years old name with anybody's gift. Again, we get those starts and stops, those coy pauses. We can tell that he knows exactly what he wants to say. It's not the dash of desperation or anything like we saw with Carrie and Comfort, if you've been watching this series, but instead this is the measured pause of somebody who's saying, how shall I put it, and then putting it exactly how he intends. So she, according to him, should have ranked his gift of 900 years old name above anybody else's, the cherries, all these other things, because he and his stuff is all so much more important. Who'd stoop to blame this sort of trifling? Even had you skill in speech, which I have not. That's a typical kind of politician move to say, I don't have skill in speaking. Everybody does this. I mean, all the way back to Canterbury Tales, there are people who start that way, and then of course they can speak very well. So he's trying to get the listener on his side. Even had you skill in speech, which I have not, to make your will quite clear to such a one and say, just this or that in you disgusts me. Here you miss, or here you exceed the mark, or there exceed the mark, pardon me. And if she let herself be lessoned so, nor plainly set your wits to yours, forsooth, and made excuse, even then would be some stooping, and I choose never to stoop. Okay, so he first brings up stooping, bending down, going to a lower level. Up here, when she is saying that others' gifts are just as important as his older ones. So who'd stoop to blame this sort of trifling? And then he goes on to say, if I were able to explain what about her bothered me, just this or that, and you disgust me, etc., then there would be some stooping, and I choose never to stoop. This is very telling. Here, I choose never to bend down, to lower myself, even to say I would prefer that you change your ways. It's beneath him to be able to do that. People should automatically value his gifts. People should automatically do his will. So this kicks up his controlling nature and his pride and arrogance to a pretty high degree. He won't even stoop to let her know that he's upset with her actions, which are already unjust. His perception is already unjust to begin with. Oh, sir, he continues, she smiled, no doubt, whene'er I passed her, but who passed without much the same smile? Everybody's getting all of this approval. It should just be me. This grew, I gave commands, then all smiles stopped together. There she stands as if alive. Because we have these short, independent clauses, this grew, I gave commands, then the smile stopped. It makes you pay attention to these lines. It's as though it's a punctuation mark in itself after all of this, kind of pussyfooting around the issue about how he ended up hating his wife. And it implies, since we are looking more closely at these short lines, that he killed her. This grew, all of her smiles. I gave commands, then all smiles stopped together. And we get the juxtaposition of that explanation with, there she stands as if alive. As if alive. I mean, we know that she died, and we know that her smiles stopped because he wanted them to. So this is really chilling. And again, it raises the question, who is he talking to? Who is he telling this story to, where he's implying but not admitting to the murder of his wife? So then we get the answer at the end. Will it please you rise? So they were sitting watching, looking at this portrait while he spoke. We'll meet the company below then. I repeat, the Count, your master's known munificence, is ample warrant that no just pretense of mine for dowry will be disallowed, though his fair daughter's self, as I avowed at starting, is my object. Okay, so now we get a ton of good information. Here we have, this is somebody who serves the Count, the one that he's talking to, somebody who serves the Count, who is basically brokering a deal for the marriage of the Count's daughter. He talks about how, dowry situation and all of that, but the end is really the part that's the most important, I guess, besides just finding out who this guy is. His fair daughter's self, as I avowed at starting, is my object. Object is a telling word. It's on the one hand, it's her that I care most about. She is the object of this conversation, but object also implies, of course, objectification, which is apparently what he did with his last Duchess. She was supposed to be one of his things, something that belonged only to him, and now he's getting remarried and saying this very threatening story to the one who's brokering the deal. So he's clearly trying to get a better result, a more obedient wife out of this next person, which is just, it's a chilling speech. A lot that goes on in just a page and a half. Nay, he concludes, we'll go together down, sir. Notice Neptune, though, taming a seahorse, thought a rarity, which Claus of Innsbruck cast in bronze for me. So the final note of this poem is looking at another statue. Apparently the Duke, of course, is very, very well off, and so not only does he have this painting, but he also has this statue of Neptune taming a seahorse, and it seems pretty clear from everything that we've seen so far that he kind of views himself as Neptune, as this sort of fickle god who's taming his creatures. He tries to do it with his last Duchess and is planning to do it with his next. So it's pretty creepy, and it's not that there's supposed to be a big message to this poem necessarily. It's more of a sense of what would it be like to listen to this man, and what can we read between the lines, and things like that. So I hope you enjoyed that really kind of strange ride. Make sure to like this video if you like it, and subscribe for more English nerdy goodness. All right, I'll see you next Monday. Bye.